Hello guys, just realized it's been a while since I did the original video going over monocolored, colorless cards in Commander using EDHREC.com as sort of the data that I'll look over. And I said I was going to do a follow-up with two color cards, two color Commander options, assessing their power, their strengths in the format, and telling you which ones I favor more than others. So let's get right into this video. We're going to start it off here in order Azorius commanders. Now the most played commander is Brago King Eternal. It's not even close. Grand Arbiter Augustine is a very close second. However, Grand Arbiter is probably the most competitive out of all of the Azorius commanders. He's like tier 1.5, I think, maybe tier 2. But still, just going up against a ton of competitive decks that want to storm off, or just any deck that wants to play a ton of spells in order to win, making their spells cost one more, even if it's just one generic more, that's a huge difference maker in competitive EDH. And it usually is elsewhere in Commander, but not the most fun deck to play because usually people hate you if you do that, so you're probably better off if you want to have a decent relationship with other people inside your playgroup playing with something like Brago, Bruna, Light of Alabaster, pretty much everything else here. My problem with Azorius is that it's not really deep in playability. You have other strategies here, but nothing that's really unique. It's kind of narrow. Like Geista Saint Traft doesn't really do anything for me, kind of a Voltron, but 2/2 hexproof. I mean, yeah, I can make a 4/4 token, but nothing really special beyond that. So I would honestly recommend sticking with either Brago or Bruna, or maybe even Afara, God of the Polis. Noyan Dar can be unique, but you're probably better off with those other ones. Those strategies just are a lot more fun to play around with. A lot more stuff is going to come out that are going to synergize with things like Afara or Brago. ETBs are pretty cool. Next two color pairing is Dimir. Kind of the same thing. There isn't really too much depth, but I think you have a lot more options that are playable. It's kind of just like zombies or mill, and that's going to make up a lot of the Dimir commanders. You do have some that kind of stand on their own, like Vela the Nightclad and Siga River Cutthroat, but Phoenix God of Deception, Gizan Geralf, Scarab God, Lazav, Una Queen of the Fae, they're kind of in the same range of decks being made. I would probably have to go with Una Queen of the Fae though if you're talking about most competitive, because all you really need to do is just get infinite mana, which is so easy in these colors. You tutor up a combo, get the infinite mana, and then just exile your opponent's decks. And it's not like other mill where it's just milling it into the graveyard, it's exile. So not only do you get a ton of tokens, but they can't really get anything back. But Phoenix is probably the most fun to play with because it's a strategy that involves mill, but you're milling in a unique way where you're tapping your creatures, and certain creatures have abilities that work well with tapping, like Inspire. So I'd probably go with him for a more fun build, but Una's probably the strongest. And then looking at the Rakdos commanders, Rakdos is actually really fun. You have so many different strategies here. I mean, just looking at it, you have Vampire Tribal, you have Minotaur Tribal, you have Bottom of the Deck Tribal, if that's really a thing with Grenzo, and you also have -1/-1 counters with the Scorpion God. You have cost reduction with Rakdos Lord of Riots, and you just have Spiteful, grind your opponents down with damage with Mogus God of Slaughter, and Karavek the Merciless. There's just a lot of strategies here. Some of it overlaps, some of it doesn't, but there's nothing really super powerful within Rakdos. That's the only problem. You don't have anything that's going to be seeing a ton of play in competitive EDH. Is usually going to get overwhelmed by power elsewhere in the format. Then we have GRUEL. This is the color pairing that you're going to see a lot of massive creatures, or just creature-based decks in general. And everyone's favorite, doesn't even come close in second. You have Xenagos, but first you have Omnath, Locus of Rage, with over 2,000 decks made. Everybody loves that landfall theme. Everybody loves those tokens that when they die, you get to deal 3 damage to a target creature or player. And Xenagos has a ton of potential. You can just come out of nowhere and win with commander damage. But my favorite in these two colors is probably Rurik Thar, because you can make a pure creature deck and it actually feels like it's on theme. You're punishing your opponents who are playing non-creature spells. I even made a deck called Blue Screw where that's the whole purpose of the deck, is to just screw over your opponents who are playing blue, anything like cantrips or even Storm. Like, this guy will definitely stop a Storm player right in their tracks because they cast 4 or 5 non-creature spells, they can easily be out of the game. Other people who are trying to play competitive EDH, he can definitely hurt them. But GRUEL definitely is lacking in terms of depth other than that. I mean, you do have Borborygmos Enraged, which is another land strategy that's kind of unique, but the rest is just creature strategies and nothing I really found too interesting. Celestia, if you're talking just competitive EDH, you're probably best off with Selvala Explorer Returned. Sort of middle of the road, you could play Captain Sese, you can get Planeswalkers, stuff like that, really cool. But most people seem to really enjoy Tristani and Karametra. Those strategies are very easy to build around, don't take too much effort, but they're not super powerful decks. Karametra, if you make an enchantment constellation theme, that could definitely work. But again, nothing super competitive. It's kind of tokens, populate tokens, that kind of strategy. With Tristani and Risk the Redeemed, they're kind of like the same deck. Another somewhat competitive deck, you can make a Safi Eriksdotter. And you of course have the cat tribal thing going on there, so you kind of have depth like with Rakdos, but I don't know, just the colors were never really super interesting to me. Voltron with Sigarda, Host of Herons is pretty good. Combos with Safi. If you want to just absolutely annoy your opponents, play Gaddock Teague. I mean, there is a lot of different strategies here, so you do have options. And then we have Orzhov, probably my favorite color pairing, even though there isn't too much diversity in the strategies. It's pretty much just life gain and tokens. But there's also some control sub-themes, especially with Ailey, Eternal Pilgrim, and Karlov of the Ghost Council. They have exiling removal built into them. But yeah, I mean, you see kind of a lot of decks around that 1,000 range. Tesa's in the upper 800s. There's a lot of control with her as well. But Daxos the Returned is probably the only unique strategy here that isn't going to deal with life gain or creature tokens. It's just an enchantment themed deck. The rest is kind of similar. But I really do love this color pairing. And then Izzet is probably one of my least favorite ones just because it kind of suffers from just not having enough unique strategies or anything that's really kind of middle of the road without being broken. It's kind of all or nothing. With Izzet colors, it's either really good or it's really bad. So you can make a really good Milek Izzet Paragon deck, but you can also make a really bad one. But you have really super competitive ones like Joyra of the Gitu and the other Joyra, which is now a Cheerios deck that's really funny for Storm. And there's some combos associated with Mizzix, as well as Niv Mizzet, the Firemind, and of course the Locust God. Might be the only commander here that I actually enjoy without making him completely busted. But it does seem with Izzet colors that you kind of have to depend on the same exact control shell for every single deck. So to me, at least, they're not as unique. And then Gogari colors. This is probably the best one if you're looking for all-around kind of strategies. Because while Golgari is going to share a similar theme with Graveyard Recursion, there's definitely different strategies to go along with it. Marin of Clan Neltoth is probably one of the most popular commanders in the entire format. Directly dealing with Graveyard synergies, to me, she's kind of boring because everybody's played with her at least once. And you have some somewhat competitive decks, like with the Gitrog monster, deals with lands and getting card draw off of you, sacrificing them, can be a very decent Golgari control deck. And then you have an awesome stacks commander in Nath of the Gilt Leaf. You can get some tokens off of him. You have probably one of the most unique strategies you're ever going to find with Glissa the Trader dealing with artifacts in Golgari colors, something you're probably not going to see too often. And you have -1/-1 counters and tokens with Hapatra, Vizier of Poisons, yet again pretty unique, dealing with -1/-1 counters when the rest don't really do that. You have a Skullbriar, the Walking Grave, which is kind of a pretty decent Voltron commander. Really the only card that does anything like that, really. +1/+1 counters aren't going to leave. It's in the command zone anywhere else. It's just going to have those +1/+1 counters. And Mazrit Krall Death Priest is kind of like an Archangel of Thune, but for Golgari colors, sacrificing permanents. Really awesome. Just a ton of diversity here in Golgari colors. You can play so many of them and feel like you're playing different decks. It's kind of cool. And then Boros colors, which definitely needs some more support because it's kind of like the same strategy with a couple of exceptions. I mean, Depala, Pilot Exemplar, and Jor Kadeen, the Prevailer, are kind of unique, but the rest is just good keywords in combat, and that's kind of what Boros does best. You have Aurelia the War Leader getting you extra combat steps, and just Celebrated Gold Knight. These two angels are pretty powerful, but as you can see here, there's not a single commander that has over 1,000 decks made for it here in this database. So I think that does speak volumes about Boros colors and how uninspiring they can be at times for many people, including myself. I mean, you do have a tribal theme with Kalemne, Disciple of Iroas. The problem is, though, most people don't really want to play a tribal theme where most of your creatures are going to cost 5 or greater, especially to get those experience counters for Giant Tribal, which is what it really was. And then the last color pairing is Simic Colors, which again, I think at times can be very narrow in the strategy. You have the more competitive commander in Edric Spymaster of Trest. There's a competitive EDH Turns deck. I wouldn't call him tier 1. I think he's tier 1.5 now, but he used to be tier 1. All you did with that deck is just play a bunch of 1-drops that can get in easy evasion, deal combat damage, draw into extra turn spells, play them, get another turn, attack, draw a shit ton of cards, and then just take more turns. Really powerful commander. And you of course have the combos with Azuri Claw of Progress, or you can take a whole bunch of turns there as well, but it's not anywhere near as competitive as with Edric. Like, Momir Vieg has some interesting interactions, but so did every other legend from Dissension that kind of fooled around with that. I mean, Teysa, not from Dissension, from Guild Pack, but still similar strategy, similar interactions with individual colored creatures. And you of course have the Merfolk Tribal with Kumena, Tyrant of Orazca, and Tatiova, Benthic Druid with lands. You also have Experiment Crash with activated abilities. I don't know what it is, but I just never really took a liking to Simic Colors. I always feel like I want to play either white or black in addition to them, like it's incomplete, but I don't know. I see other people play Simic decks and it works out for them. For me, there's just not enough that's really interesting. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Hope I helped you out if you are looking for advice when it comes to two-color commander decks, which ones you should go with. Of course, I was biased throughout this video. This is definitely more opinionated rather than just looking at how many deck lists were made, and I only use EDH Rec here just to give an example, just to see how many decks were made. It's not a guarantee that these are the most popular ones, it's just the most likely case. It's not to say that ones that don't have a ton of deck lists are just unpopular. It just might be the fact that a lot of people didn't make online deck lists for them. But as always, you guys have a wonderful day. Void here signing off. See you all next video.